Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for traveling from wherever you came from. I hope you had a beautiful, beautiful drive. The Keynote was showing off. All right, I think everybody saw it. I want to start by introducing myself. I'm Chris Miller. I'm president of the Keynote Environmental Council. And I've been honored to serve in that role since 1996.
As chair of PEC, it's really a remarkable honor to work with this organization, which is truly a leader nationally in the environmental community. The results over those 50 years include nearly 450,000 acres of protected, conserved, private land, and approximately And then there's approximately another 150,000 acres of publicly managed conservation land, so nearly 600,000 acres in this region protected through the efforts of PEC, Land Trust Virginia, BOF, and other organizations who work very closely and collaborate together very effectively. So PEC's work has never been more relevant than it is now. We face those development pressures that continue to pose the transportation issues and strains on natural resources. I know we're going through that here in Charlottesville, as well as across the Piedmont and across the country, frankly. Thank you for your past support. Thank you for your current support. Thank you for your interest over the years. Thanks to you, PEC is a strong and effective organization, like I said before, among the leaders in the nation on these environmental issues. And as we rise to meet these present and future challenges, I hope we can count on your continued support.
One of the things I want you to think about today is where you've come from, the path that you took, what you saw along the way. You know, one of the central challenges facing the conservation movement right now is our willingness to accept the natural beauty of a place is part of what makes us human. It's part of what we care about. It's one of the highest values that we have. My staff knows that I will argue vehemently that polling shows that the trip to the national park is as important as the national park itself. When you stand on Skyline Drive at a beautiful vantage point, you're not actually looking at public land, you're looking at private land. If that land is conserved, and that experience is a wonderful public benefit that comes from private land's conservation. And what's the sort of big picture? That's what 450,000 acres of conserved land looks like. It's on a landscape of about 2.2 million. So we're pushing towards that long-term goal of 50% for nature. One of the most brilliant things that John Birdsall encouraged when he came on the PEC board in the 1980s was the thought that we could conserve half for nature, have some for working landscapes, and still plan for sustainable and growing communities. And this map actually represents that. We are moving deliberately towards that 50% goal. We're about, what is it, Mike, 26% of the way there?
So 30% in the next.
And if we protect another 110,000 acres by 2030, we will be 30% at that point. We're here very intentionally. This building, Code building, was a dream of Joffrey Woodruff. He's a second-generation easement donor. His father was one of the first donors in Madison Barber Historic District in Orange. Joffrey's done an enormous amount of conservation himself. Very intentional about being here. Being in the center of a walkable, livable community, connecting people to where they live. So being here is intentional for that reason. But also because we're going to be able to tell one of our stories, which is how we connect urban neighborhoods to nature and how those connections across both public and private land are important to long-term building of community, but also a model for how we connect communities to the larger natural conservation movement. We're part of something much bigger, and all those public benefits that are local also create benefits at the national and global scale. Andrew is a real friend of PEC. He's been president of the Land Trust Alliance for the past 8 years, since 2016. And he came in with a vision. He wanted to move the conservation movement forward in dealing with the energy transition that we need to make, and to help do it in a way that protected natural conservation values. So, Andrew, we want to thank you, and we want to present you with an award called the PEC Conservation Award.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, PEC, for this wonderful award. I'm humbled and just so deeply appreciative of all the time we've had together over the last 8.5 years. I just want to make a few comments today to acknowledge that PEC, in many ways, is what we at the Land Trust Alliance would like every land trust to be and to become. We are the National Association of Land Trusts. We have about 950 members. And few are as strong and as multifaceted and as sophisticated as PEC. As you've heard today, and you probably already know, 450,000 acres is a tremendous accomplishment. The large landscapes that are being protected, the working lands, the wildlife habitat. And as Chris has emphasized, PEC has been out in front around community-based conservation. You're trying so hard to make sure that everyone in these 9 counties in the service territory is served by conservation, and it's exactly what we hope to see more of at the Land Trust Alliance. And then I wanted to take the time today to talk a bit about an issue that Chris has already mentioned just a tad, and that is this emerging conflict between renewable energy development and conservation. One of the things I try to talk about in every forum I can is it's essential for our community to not come across as obstreperous or anti-renewable energy, because we're not, and we can't be. But when you look at what's coming, and you look at the demands on the landscape, it is sobering. And we have to find a way to have the both and. We have to find a way to do both of these things. Have the renewable energy system, but really, really protect very important undeveloped land. Now, I knew about this renewable energy conflict years ago, and I've been trying to promote it for a number of years in different capacities. But I didn't know anything about the data center issue until I learned it from Chris. And again, this is something else that I want you to know about PEC. PEC educated the rest of us about this issue. And yes, it's huge right here in Virginia, and I'm going to read you some statistics in a second. This is ground zero, whatever the term is. Like, this is where it's happening, but it's about to happen throughout the U.S. Chris is on our Land Trust Leadership Council, which is pretty much 50 of the best executive directors and presidents of land trusts across the country. And he's educating all of them that this is coming to their service territory as well. Virginia, which is home to more than 70% of the world's data center traffic, is projected to see power consumption from the technology at least double by 2030, and you probably have even better numbers. And according to this report, that could mean that roughly 40% of the state's electricity use will come from data centers by the end of this decade. So this is an existential threat. I think that's the term that Chris used. And just to bring it back to something positive, at least you can take comfort that you have a group like PEC with tremendous expertise, tremendous staff, and a multifaceted approach to dealing with this. How can we actually reduce the energy generation we do need? How can we have a distributed generation? How can we have the utility scale solar, but done in the right places in the right way? These are all the things that PEC is grappling with, and what they're doing here will be the model across the country. So let me just wrap up by saying thank you for all that you do to support PEC, because it's an essential institution, not just here in the Piedmont, not just here throughout the state, but nationally as well. And thank you again for this lovely honor.
I'm delighted to introduce my longtime colleague and friend, Dr. Travis Belote, who's here with us. Travis is the Senior Science Director at the Wilderness Society, and his research focuses on studying the ecology to inform landscape conservation. And at TWS, he leads a team of research ecologists who support conservation efforts across the U.S.
Chris, Liese, thank you all for entrusting me in this role. I'm going to be talking about some of the research that we have led at the Wilderness Society, but the stuff that we did about 10 years ago, thinking about the 30 by 30, or actually 30 by 30 wasn't even a thing about 10 years. This was half Earth. It was sort of Nature Needs Half had started. If we're talking about half Earth, which half? Not just random, but like which half should we be focusing on? If we're thinking about additional wilderness areas, additional conservation areas, like what should we be thinking about? What are the criteria? What are the things? What are the values of the places that we want to conserve? What do they hold? So we started asking some questions and doing some data analysis. I'm going to show you lots of maps in terms of timber harvest. And folks have put all of those kinds of data sets together, roads, land use, night sky, into something called the human footprint. There's various versions of this. One's called the Human Modification Index. But it's all trying to identify those places that are experiencing a growth of all kinds of industrial human impacts. So we use that to track the decline of natural areas, but we can also map the relatively wild areas, those places of relatively high ecological integrity, to say, okay, let's come up with some targets on what we need to do to conserve nature. If we want to protect nature in the future, what are the things we need to do? Which 30%, which half? Retain existing intact areas, so areas of high ecological integrity, but it's basically those places that are relatively unfragmented, that still hold on to all the suites of species that historically occurred there. But we also know that in the face of climate change, we can't just focus on federal lands. I mean, the private lands are absolutely critical. So this, I'm sure you all have seen this, but it came from the Nature Conservancy using some data from Joshua Aldrich, professor at the University of Washington. So Josh and his colleagues looked at amphibians, mammals, and birds and said, where do they occur now? Where might they occur in the future? How might, given climate change, given a change in temperature and precipitation, how are they going to get from where they occur now to where they occur in the future? And then they had an animator sort of create this visualization of where there are like hot spots or concentration, channelization of where species are going to need to move. And so, not surprisingly, the whole Appalachian chain shows up as this critical corridor for climate change migrations. So those are the places that are high storage, but those places that are high capture places are maybe more important because those are the places that are taking carbon out of the atmosphere. We ultimately have too much carbon in the atmosphere, so we want to take it out and then store it in woods and soils for the long term. The eastern forest is globally significant in this. This is some data that came out just a couple of years ago from a sensor that's on the International Space Station. It showed, again, the blue areas, this is sort of carbon, this is a measure of carbon, so how much carbon is coming out of the atmosphere and being stored in forests, basically. The east is literally globally significant with that. So it doesn't rival the Pacific Northwest in terms of carbon storage or the Amazon rainforest in terms of carbon storage, but in terms of a system that is recovering from 150 years ago when we just sort of like denuded the forest and cut them up, those forests are growing. Those things are gaining weight right now, and the gaining weight is gaining weight of carbon. So globally significant in terms of letting those forests continue to grow because they are globally significant with respect to their absorption of carbon. The other place to look is, this is some work that Susan Patton did from Nature Conservancy, is look at where are those places that are not forests now that were historically forests that could capture carbon in the future. So we can look at a global map of that. We can zoom into the lower 48. The green areas are those places that have high carbon potential. And then zoom in again to the PEC. So a lot of that pasture land is beautiful. We need to sustain some of that agricultural land. But it also represents a huge opportunity, nationally significant opportunity for turning those places into carbon storage for their climate change benefits. Again, it's just always good to take some of these data and zoom in and tell the story of where does my place fit into the bigger picture here. Put that together into this one map, biodiversity, carbon, drinking water. Red areas in this particular map are the most important places for sustaining those three big issues. So you can think of it as like biodiversity, climate solutions, and in some ways an equity issue. So does everybody have access to clean water or not? Into one map. If you take the top 20% of values in that map and then zoom in to the lower 48, again, you can start to see like, okay, globally significant areas, top 20% priorities in the red here. Zoom in even more. Again, I told you we were looking at squares with numbers, and you can really see them when you're looking at the global data set zoomed in this far. You can see all that pixelation. But those red areas are the top 20% globally significant areas for biodiversity, carbon, and drinking water, and her right here in the PEC area. We have the ability to think globally, we have the ability to measure globally, and clearly you all are working locally. This is just a little animation I put together showing the easements as they've accumulated over the decades. Watch that go through there. You know, this is what it takes to actually do conservation. Just very exciting to be here and proud to have you all have me here. So this is just showing the graph of that. So this is the cumulative acres conserved. And again, I'm going to go back to this map of impervious surfaces. And you know, to me, Ben Mackay, who was one of the founders of the Appalachian Trail, one of the founders of the Wilderness Society, talked about the Appalachian Trail as a bulwark against industrial expansion. And this is your all's bulwark, it seems like to me. That you all putting in these easements are why this isn't more dramatic, right? This is underwhelming in some places because of the work you all have done. This is really cool to have told the story in my own head looking at some of these data. To me, I feel like you guys are really taking care of this place, so thank you for having me.